The restaurant was nearly empty, just the hum of the soda machine and the soft clink of silverware being rolled into napkins. It was almost midnight. My third shift of the day was ending. My lower back ached, my sneakers were soaked with mop water, and my manager had just asked me to cover for someone else next weekend. I was wiping down the last table when my phone buzzed. A video call from Eliza. My heart lifted a little. I hadn't heard from her in weeks. I swiped to answer, instantly met with her flawless face lit by what looked like a champagne chandelier. She was at a party. I could hear the music, the laughter, the clinking of crystal glasses in the background. "There you are," she said, grinning. Her hair was done up in that elegant bun she always wore for hospital events, and her white coat peeked through the open neckline of her dress. "Big night. We just wrapped the gala. Huge donors. I spoke on behalf of the cardiology department." "That's amazing," I said, setting the rag on the table, trying not to show how tired I looked under the fluorescent light. "I'm proud of you." She glanced off screen for a second and laughed at something someone said, then looked back at me. "Oh, right, I meant to tell you. Someone asked if my family's in medicine. I said, no, just me." That stung, but I didn't say anything. Then she sipped her drink and added, like it was nothing, "I guess you wouldn't really get it, Liana. You're just a waitress." I froze. Just a waitress. Her words were light, casual, no venom in her voice, which somehow made it worse. She wasn't even trying to be cruel. That was simply how she saw me. I started, but she cut me off. "Wait, hold on. They're doing another toast." She angled the camera toward the crowd and waved at someone. "I'll call you later." And just like that, the call ended. I stood in the middle of the empty dining room, the buzz of the call fading to silence, the blue glow of the phone screen reflected on the tabletop. I looked down at my apron, the faint smell of fryer oil clinging to me, and suddenly felt like I was suffocating. She called me just a waitress. I was the one who had skipped college to work 3 jobs when Mom got sick. I was the one who filled out her FAFSA, paid her tuition deposits, and sent her care packages stuffed with granola bars and $20 bills I couldn't afford to give. I was the one who walked her through panic attacks the night before exams, the one who showed up at her white coat ceremony even when I couldn't afford the flight. And now I was just a waitress. My hands trembled as I locked up the restaurant. I didn't cry. I couldn't even feel tears. There was only this strange hollowness in my chest, like someone had taken a pair of scissors to my insides and snipped something loose. Outside, the street was quiet. I got into my 10-year-old Honda and sat behind the wheel for a long time, the engine off, the parking lot empty. I stared at the building's reflection in the windshield. She didn't mean it like that, I told myself, but deep down, I knew better. Eliza wasn't cruel. She just didn't think I mattered. And that hurt more than if she'd screamed it in my face. In that moment, sitting in my rusted car with calloused hands and aching feet, I realized something that had been building for years. All the sacrifice, all the years I poured into her dreams. They hadn't made me worthy in her eyes. They'd made me invisible. That was the moment something in me began to shift. Not into bitterness, not yet, but into something far more dangerous. Determination. I wasn't always a waitress, and Eliza wasn't always distant. There was a time when we were inseparable. 2 girls growing up in a tiny town outside Columbus, Ohio, raised by a single mother who worked at the post office and never let us feel poor, even when we were. Our father passed away when I was 10 and Eliza was 7, a car accident. I remember the way Mom sat between us at the funeral, one hand on each of our backs, like she was trying to hold the 3 of us together through sheer touch. After that, I grew up fast. I learned how to change the oil in Mom's car, how to stretch a grocery budget, how to tuck Eliza into bed on nights when Mom had to work overtime. I wasn't her mom, but I was close enough. Even back then, Eliza was the golden one. Smart, curious, always asking questions, always reading books meant for kids twice her age. Mom used to say, "This one's going to wear a white coat one day." She said it proudly, but I could see the worry behind her smile. We didn't have money for college, let alone med school. So, I made a decision. By the time I graduated high school, I had a partial scholarship to a culinary institute in Chicago. Cooking had always been my dream. Not just cooking, but owning something. A cafe with big windows and plants in every corner. A place where people felt safe. But the summer before I was supposed to leave, Mom's health got worse. She started missing work, spending whole days in bed. The doctors said it was lupus, the kind of thing you manage, not cure. Insurance didn't cover everything. We had bills, meds, appointments. Eliza was just finishing sophomore year of high school, and she still needed rides, lunches, all the things kids don't think about but someone has to provide. So I deferred my scholarship. Just 1 year, I told myself. I got a job at Benny's Diner downtown, then another one cleaning offices after hours, and a third one on weekends babysitting for a woman who worked nights at the hospital. That just 1 year turned into 4. I watched my friends post pictures of their dorm rooms, their internships, their study abroad trips. I didn't resent them. I just filed the feelings away and kept going. I told myself it was worth it. And it was. At first. Eliza got into Ohio State, pre-med. I screamed when she opened the letter. I hugged her like I'd never let go. She cried too, saying, "You made this possible." I sent her money every month. I skipped new shoes so she could afford her anatomy books. I gave up shifts only when she needed someone to talk to the night before a test. When she came home for breaks, she'd always say thanks. She always gave me a long hug. Sometimes she even joked, "You're the real MVP." I think the shift started during her second year. Her phone calls got shorter, her texts more formal. She started correcting my grammar in messages. Not in a mean way, just in that polished tone of someone forgetting how we used to speak. And then there were the social media posts. The selfies in lab coats, the captions about grinding and hustle culture and rising without help. I tried not to take it personally. She was finding her identity, I told myself. She was building something. That's what I wanted for her. Still, it hurt. Especially the way our mother started talking. "Eliza's doing so well," she'd say with pride, even on days I came home dead tired after a triple shift. "You should see how polished she looked at that conference, just like a real doctor." I didn't blame Mom. She was proud of both of us in her own way. But she didn't see what I was giving up. Not really. By the time Eliza graduated med school, full honors, a residency offer from one of the best hospitals in the state, I was still at Benny's. Still folding napkins, still swapping shifts, still keeping the dream on hold. At the graduation party, she gave a little speech to the family. She thanked Mom. She thanked her professors. She even thanked her cat. But not me. I stood in the corner, holding a plastic cup of warm lemonade, and smiled through it. Because that's what you do, right? You smile through it. I told myself that one day she'd see it. She'd look back and realize who had been there from the beginning. But looking back now, I think I misunderstood something fundamental. Eliza didn't forget what I did for her. She just didn't think it mattered. Because in her world, the world of conferences, credentials, business cards, sacrifice isn't impressive unless it comes with a title. And I didn't have one. Not yet. There's a strange thing that happens when you're always the one making the sacrifices. People stop noticing that you're bleeding. At the diner, I'd become part of the furniture. I was the reliable one. The one who never called out sick, who covered the last-minute no-shows, who remembered the names of every regular and how they liked their eggs. But no one ever asked what I wanted. They assumed I didn't have dreams. Or if I did, I'd already let them go. On slow nights, I'd stare out the big front window, watching people pass by with purpose. Women in scrubs getting off night shifts, college kids with backpacks heading to study, business women on their phones, heels clicking on the pavement. I used to imagine myself among them, in a blazer, holding a briefcase, not a tray of pancakes. But here I was, 6 years into the same job, with a name tag pinned to my chest, like a quiet resignation. I remember one particular afternoon, about 2 months after Eliza started her residency. A group of nurses came in for lunch, laughing, chatting, wearing their ID badges with pride. I greeted them, took their order, smiled like always. One of them looked at me and said, "You have great posture. You ever think about nursing?" I nodded politely, not bothering to explain that I once had a full ride to a culinary institute, or that I'd passed up every opportunity to chase a dream so someone else could chase hers. Another waitress, Brianna, 19 and still wide-eyed, leaned in when they left and said, "You could totally be one of them. You're too smart to be stuck here." I smiled. I appreciated her words. But deep down, they only reminded me that I was, in fact, stuck. At home, it wasn't any different. Our mom had good days and bad days with her health. And while she loved me, she talked about Eliza like she was a miracle. "You know your sister just presented a case study in front of the hospital board?" she'd tell me with excitement. "They said she's already better than some of the residents." "That's great, Mom," I'd say, refilling her pill organizer for the week. "You always knew she was destined for something bigger." I tried not to flinch at that. I didn't blame her. I knew what she meant. But it still stung. Because the truth was, I didn't think my life was supposed to be small. It just turned out that way. Eliza, for all her brilliance, had begun to treat me more like a utility than a sister. When she called, it was usually because she needed something: help filling out a grant form, someone to proofread her personal statement, advice on what to wear to a fundraiser. She'd listen, then disappear again. Never asked how I was doing. Never asked if I was still working nights, if I still had those headaches, if I still dreamed of owning that cafe with the big windows and plants in every corner. And when we did see each other in person, I felt invisible. I'll never forget the day I met our hospital friends for the first time. It was a Saturday, and Eliza had invited me to join her and her colleagues at a trendy brunch spot. I was nervous, not because I couldn't hold a conversation, but because I knew how people in her world viewed mine. When she introduced me, she said, "This is my sister Liana. She's in hospitality." I blinked. "Hospitality?" "Oh," one of them smiled politely. "Hotel management?" "No," Eliza said quickly. "She works in food service." The woman nodded vaguely and turned back to her mimosa. I sat there quietly, picking at my toast while they talked about surgical rotations and publication deadlines. No one asked me a single question, not even Eliza. She didn't even notice I hadn't spoken for 20 minutes. When the check came, I offered to pay for myself. Eliza waved her hand and said, "Don't worry, I've got it. I know how hard you work." The words weren't cruel, but they were condescending, like she was doing me a favor, like she was indulging me. That's when it really hit me. They all saw me as someone who hadn't made it. A cautionary tale, a sweet older sister who'd never left her small-town orbit, someone who gave up too much and ended up with too little. But what they didn't see, what no one saw, was that under the apron and the quiet smiles was a woman who'd held her family together, who'd delayed her own future to secure someone else's, who'd taken every punch life threw at her and was still standing. They didn't see a fighter, but I was one. And deep down, I knew they had underestimated the wrong person. It started with a message. Late one night, while I was restocking syrup bottles and wrapping silverware, I got a text from Eliza. "Thinking of you. Want to do something nice soon. You free next weekend?" I stared at it for a long time. We hadn't talked in weeks. The last time we spoke, she had cut our call short for a champagne toast. The time before that, she'd forgotten my birthday until 2 days later. So this message, this small, sudden acknowledgement, felt like oxygen after being underwater. I replied, "Yeah, I'm off next Saturday night. What's up?" She sent back a heart emoji and said, "Dinner, my treat. Dress up. You deserve a night out." I don't remember the last time I'd been invited anywhere like that. Not just as the tag-along older sister, but as someone worthy of celebrating. All week, I tried not to get too excited, but it was hard not to. I went through my tiny closet 3 times and still felt like nothing fit the occasion. So, I took a risk. I dipped into the little envelope of cash I'd been saving, my someday money, and bought a new dress. Nothing flashy, just something simple and deep green that made my skin glow and reminded me I was still a woman with presence, not just someone who brought out coffee refills and counted tips at midnight. Saturday came. I curled my hair, put on real makeup for the first time in months. When I looked in the mirror, I actually felt beautiful. Not just decent, not just okay for a waitress, but beautiful. Eliza picked me up in a rideshare. She was already sitting in the back, looking effortless in a sleek cream blazer and lipstick that probably cost more than my dress. "You look great," she said with a polite smile. "You clean up so well." It was meant as a compliment, but it stung a little, like I'd been upgraded from background noise to decor. The restaurant was in the city, one of those rooftop places with a wait list 3 weeks long, golden cutlery, and glasses so thin you're scared to breathe near them. Eliza had clearly planned it all. We were seated near the windows with a view of the skyline, and I told myself this was her way of saying thank you. Maybe, just maybe, she'd finally acknowledge what I'd done for her. We ordered, we toasted. She talked about her rotations, her supervisor who was intimidated by her talent, and the senior residents who were already treating her like an equal. I smiled, nodded, encouraged. I was used to doing that. But somewhere around the main course, she leaned in and said, "You know, I was talking to a friend the other day. She's opening a private practice, and she asked if I had anyone I trusted for catering or admin support. I thought of you." I blinked. "Me?" "Yeah. I mean, you're in food service. You're organized. You could run the front desk, maybe even coordinate meals for patient days, like a hospitality liaison or something." I sat there trying to process. This was the moment, wasn't it? The big gesture. The thank you for all those years. Only it wasn't. She didn't see me as the woman who carried her through college. She saw me as a convenience, a favor, a resume filler she could toss a bone to. I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Eliza," I said slowly, "you know I've been working on building something of my own, right?" She laughed, not unkindly. "Right? Your restaurant idea. It's more than an idea now. I've been saving, studying, writing a business plan. I've got a model I'm testing. It's called Harvest and Heal." She nodded vaguely, like I'd just told her I was trying a new hobby. "That's cute. But honestly, Liana, that industry is brutal. You're amazing with people, but restaurants, especially now, it's not realistic." And there it was. The door slammed shut. The hope that had slowly bloomed all week, that this dinner meant respect, recognition, redemption, shriveled in seconds. We finished the meal in a fog. I couldn't even taste dessert. She picked up the check like she was performing a charity act, then hugged me stiffly at the car. "Think about that office job," she said. "It'd be fun working together." I nodded and got in. The ride home was silent. The city lights blurred past the window, but I barely noticed. I was staring out into something much bigger, the widening space between who I was and who she still thought I'd always be. Just a waitress, just support staff, just the older sister who didn't make it. But she didn't know what was coming. Not yet, and neither did I. But that night, I stopped waiting for her to see me. I would make the world see me instead. 2 weeks after that glossy rooftop dinner, I was rolling silverware at the back counter when Brianna burst through the kitchen doors, phone in hand, eyes wide like she had just witnessed a crime. "Liana, you need to see this," she said, shoving the screen toward me. A live stream was playing from the hospital's annual fundraising telethon. The stage lights were bright. The banner read, "Pioneers of Modern Medicine." Center screen stood Eliza, white coat impeccably pressed, a subtle contour sharpening her cheekbones. She was being interviewed by a local reporter I recognized from the evening news. The caption at the bottom of the video glowed, "Dr. Eliza Ray, rising star surgeon, credits grit for success." I felt my pulse skip. Eliza never told me she was giving a televised interview. I set the napkin bundle down, wiped my hands on my apron, and turned up the volume. The reporter asked a softball question about her journey. Eliza tilted her head, gave a practiced smile. "I come from humble beginnings," she said. "No one paved a path for me. I worked multiple jobs, 4 actually, while excelling in school. Failure was never an option." She laughed lightly, almost endearingly. "I used to joke that sleep was a luxury I couldn't afford, but passion keeps you awake." My breath caught. 4 jobs? That was my reality, not hers. The reporter leaned in. "So there was no external support? No scholarships? Family contributions?" Eliza shook her head with a theatrical sigh. "I wish. My family didn't have the means. Everything I achieved, I funded on my own. That is why I believe in self-reliance." Brianna whispered, "Is that true?" I couldn't speak. My chest felt as if somebody had poured wet cement into it, heavy and hardening fast. I thought maybe it was a slip of the tongue, that she would course correct, mention me, mention Mom's illness, mention the nights I worked doubles to wire tuition payments before deadlines. But she kept talking, each sentence burying the truth deeper underground. Then came the final twist of the knife. The reporter asked how she planned to inspire young women. Eliza lifted her chin. "My message is simple. Never depend on anyone. If you want something badly enough, you earn it. Waiting tables or cleaning houses will not change your future. Education will." I nearly dropped the phone. Waiting tables. She threw my entire life into a single dismissive example, never acknowledging that my waiting tables had furnished every stepping stone of her career. Comment bubbles flared on the live stream. Queen energy. Self-made boss. No excuses. Tears threatened, but anger scorched them away. I handed Brianna her phone and marched to the staff restroom. Locking the door, I braced my palms on the sink and forced myself to breathe. In the mirror, I saw a woman in a grease-stained uniform, mascara smudged from a 14-hour shift. Yet behind the exhaustion was a spark that felt new, electric. My mind replayed every sacrifice, the years of missed holidays, the college acceptance letter I never used, the nights I kept Mom's fever down with damp cloths while proofreading Eliza's scholarship essays, the $1,000 textbooks I paid for using tips from refilling coffee cups. I remembered the way Eliza called me just a waitress and how I swallowed it, hoping goodwill would fix what pride had broken. That hope was dead now. I splashed water on my face, straightened, and unlocked the door. I finished my shift without speaking. Each plate I carried felt lighter than the last, because inside me something heavier was lifting. A weight I hadn't realized was optional. The need for her gratitude. Back home, I opened my laptop and scrolled through social media. The interview clip was everywhere, shared by alumni pages, hospital PR accounts, even a motivational hustle group that captioned it, "Proof excuses are useless." Thousands of likes, thousands of hearts and clapping emojis. No mention of Liana Ray, the sister who mortgaged her years so Eliza could shine. I clicked the comment box, ready to type a truth bomb in all caps. My fingers hovered above the keys, trembling. Then I stopped. There was no victory in internet battles. Not for me, not for what I intended. Instead, I opened a spreadsheet titled Harvest and Heal Budget Projections. Numbers filled the screen: ingredients, lease costs, marketing estimates. I had been inching forward, afraid of missteps. Fear died alongside hope that night. I doubled the hours I would dedicate to launching my pop-up concept, moved each deadline up by months, and sent Marcus a message. "We need to meet tomorrow. I'm ready to go all in." A notification pinged, Eliza tagging Mom in a post. "Couldn't have done it without your prayers." I stared at it, amazed by the flawless spin. Mom responded with heart emojis. She didn't know any better, and that was fine. She loved her daughter. I clicked like with the same fingers that rewrote my future. Before shutting the laptop, I did one more thing. I created a new folder called Receipts. Inside, I saved screenshots of every tuition payment confirmation, every wire transfer, every notarized statement of support. Not for revenge, for record keeping, for myself. Proof that my story existed even if no one believed it yet. When I finally lay in bed that night, I did not cry. I mapped menus in my head instead. Turmeric ginger broth for immunity, kale pesto grain bowls for heart health, blueberry chia parfaits named Morning Resilience. Food as medicine. A bridge between my world and hers. The perfect sponsorship product for a hospital desperate to modernize. I fell asleep smiling for the first time in months, not because anything had been made right, but because the universe had handed me absolute clarity. Eliza's lie had burned a bridge, yet in the glow of that fire, I saw a new path illuminated. In the morning, I would begin building it. In the weeks after Eliza's interview went viral, I disappeared. Not in the dramatic sense. I still showed up to work, still smiled at customers, still signed Mom's prescriptions, and picked up her blood pressure meds. But something inside me went quiet. The part that used to hope. The part that believed that if I just kept giving, someone, especially Eliza, would eventually see me. That part had gone dark. At the diner, I moved like a machine. Wipe table, refill coffee, drop check, smile, walk away. My coworkers noticed the difference, though they didn't press. Brianna stopped showing me videos. My manager stopped asking if I wanted to take on the weekend catering gig, because I'd started saying no to everything. Even the regulars noticed. "Rough week, hun," Mrs. Kaplan asked gently, clutching her decaf like it was made of gold. I gave her a small smile. "Something like that." It wasn't one thing. It was everything. It was the silence after the noise, the kind of emptiness that feels like walking through fog. Nothing exactly wrong, but everything a little off. My body moved, but my heart felt like it had nowhere to land. At home, I said little to Mom. She was still proud of Eliza's broadcast moment, and I didn't have it in me to ruin that for her. When I tried to bring it up, gently, she just said, "She didn't mean to forget you. She was probably nervous. You know how public speaking makes her act stiff." Stiff? It wasn't stiff. It was deliberate. But I didn't argue. What was the point? The truth was, I wasn't angry at Mom. I was angry at myself for waiting, for giving so much space in my life to someone who never truly made room for me in hers. The hardest part wasn't the lie. It was realizing I had let it happen. Over years. One small silence at a time. One day, I came home to find an envelope on the kitchen table. Eliza had sent Mom a signed printout of a magazine article that featured her hospital's rising star doctors. Eliza's headshot was front and center, confident, poised, titled "The Heart of the Future." On the back, she'd scribbled, "To Mom, for believing, always. Love, E." I stood there for a long time, staring at the glossy page. She hadn't even signed it to us. That night I lay in bed scrolling through old texts between us. There were hundreds, mostly from me. I read my own words like I was someone else. "Don't forget your white coat ceremony is at 6. I'll be there early. Want me to proof your statement again? I made some notes on the cardiology section. I just transferred the rent. Try not to stress. You're going to crush this rotation. Love you. Always here." Her replies were short, grateful sometimes, but never reciprocal. Not in a real way. I hadn't just been her sister. I'd been her assistant, her silent partner, her backup plan. And now, I wasn't even a footnote. That realization sank into me like ice water. I didn't cry, not yet. I just felt still, like my emotions had run out of road and skidded into some kind of numb. I stopped calling her. I stopped replying when she sent messages about the new hospital wing or the research conference she might speak at. I didn't even respond when she asked if I could help her organize a grant application packet, since you're so good with forms. I read the text and deleted it. The silence I gave her wasn't revenge, it was survival, because I couldn't keep pouring into a space that never gave anything back. Still, there were lonely moments, crushingly lonely. Moments when I'd look at our old photos, her in scrubs, me in an apron, both of us smiling with tired eyes, and wonder if I'd imagined the bond. If I'd built an entire chapter of my life on a sisterhood that only I believed in. One Sunday morning I stayed home from work, called off, said I had a migraine, which wasn't a lie. I'd had one for weeks, pressing like a weight behind my eyes. I lay on the couch all day watching food documentaries, not because I needed distraction, but because they reminded me of something real, something I had put aside for too long. The kitchen, my kitchen. Not the one at Benny's, the one I imagined in my dreams, with reclaimed wood counters, chalkboard menus, herbal teas named after emotions, dishes that healed instead of just filled. A place where people didn't feel invisible. Something stirred inside me that day, something I hadn't felt since high school, when I used to sketch cafe layouts on the backs of my notebooks. That old dream wasn't dead, just buried. And maybe it was time to dig it up. Later that night, I opened my laptop and clicked on a bookmarked folder I hadn't touched in months. Business plan drafts. It was messy, half-finished, full of doubt. But it was mine. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something other than tired or bitter. I felt ready. Not for revenge, but for resurrection. It was a Wednesday afternoon when I ran into Marcus again. I hadn't seen him in nearly 6 years, not since high school, where he was the quiet kid in AP English with headphones always hanging around his neck and a sketchbook full of tech startup ideas no one took seriously. We weren't exactly close back then, but we shared an unspoken alliance. 2 kids from working-class families who didn't quite belong in the school's academic elite, but never stopped trying to. The last I'd heard, he'd moved to Chicago, got into tech consulting, and somehow managed to build an app that helped local vendors optimize deliveries. I'd always thought that was cool, not that I ever told him. Life had swept us in different directions. I was on my break, sitting outside the diner with a coffee and my Harvest and Heal sketchpad open on my lap. A quiet dream I'd started revisiting after Eliza's betrayal had made one thing crystal clear. No one was coming to rescue me. If I wanted a new life, I had to build it myself. I didn't even notice him at first. A familiar voice just said, "Still doodling menus?" And when I looked up, there he was, same messy curls, but taller now, cleaner lines in his face, wearing a soft hoodie and designer sneakers that screamed, "Casual tech millionaire." I blinked. Marcus? He smiled. Knew it was you. I've walked past this place 3 times this week, but I wasn't sure. Today I saw the sketchbook and thought, yep, that's gotta be Liana Ray. I laughed, and for the first time in what felt like months, it wasn't forced. He sat down across from me, and we talked for nearly an hour. About the old days, about his app, about how the world had changed, about how we had changed. He told me he was in town finalizing a partnership with a health-focused logistics brand. When I mentioned I was working on a wellness food concept, he leaned forward like I just handed him a riddle. You've got a brand name? Harvest and Heal, I said. It's meant to feel nourishing. Not just food, but a way of living. Local ingredients, functional healing, mind-body alignment. He nodded, impressed. That's actually really good. You got a pitch deck? A prototype menu? I hesitated, then handed him my sketch pad. He flipped through the pages in silence. My handwriting filled every inch. Annotated dishes, mood board clippings, nutrition pairings, even notes about potential suppliers. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. More real than I'd realized until I saw someone else's eyes take it seriously. When he closed the pad, he said, You know, this could be huge. I almost laughed. I'm a waitress, Marcus. He tilted his head. No, you're someone with a vision, a tested palate, and 6 years of operational food service experience, which honestly puts you ahead of half the founders I work with. I stared at him. You're not just saying that? I don't say things to be nice. I say things when I see potential, and I see it in you. It was such a simple sentence, but it cracked something in me, because it had been years since anyone said they saw something in me. Not behind me, not under me, not sacrificed for someone else. Me. Tell you what, he continued. I know some people, investors, designers. If you're serious about this, I mean really serious, I can help you shape the pitch. Maybe even get in front of someone who can fund it. My instinct was to say no, to back out, to claim I wasn't ready, that I didn't have the money, the experience, the credibility. But something about his tone, calm, matter-of-fact, unromantic, made me believe he wasn't offering out of pity. He was offering because I was worth investing in, so I said yes. We started meeting every Saturday, sometimes at the diner during my slow shifts, sometimes over video calls late at night. I'd show him revised business models. He'd send me branding toolkits and restaurant analytics sheets. He broke things down in a way I could understand, and I soaked it up like dry soil after a drought. He even helped me secure a 1-month booth slot at a local health fair. You don't need a full location to prove concept, he said. You need visibility, feedback, and a wait list. We called it a soft ignition. I called it my first real taste of belief, not just from someone else, but from myself. Because the truth was, I had built something. Not just ideas on a page, but grit in my bones. A life of discipline, of tenacity, of resilience. All I needed was one person to shine a light on it. Marcus did that. And because of him, I no longer saw myself as just a sister or just a waitress. I saw myself as a founder in the making. And that shift, that single moment of being seen, changed everything. If there's one thing being invisible teaches you, it's how to build without an audience. After my conversations with Marcus, I didn't march out and quit my job. I didn't post a bold announcement online or throw away my apron in some dramatic act of rebellion. That's not how real growth happens, not for people like me. I grew in silence. I built in private. Every shift I worked at the diner funded another piece of the puzzle. While Eliza was earning hospital awards and taking selfies at galas, I was setting money aside in a plain envelope taped beneath my kitchen sink. Handwritten in marker, H&H Capital Fund. I didn't tell anyone, not even Mom. Every tip counted. Every shift mattered. I clipped coupons. I sold off old clothes. I started cooking at home more, using those sessions to test my recipes. Lentil turmeric stew, beet hummus on gluten-free toast, rosemary mushroom grain bowls. I wasn't just experimenting, I was perfecting. By day, I took notes in a tattered composition book I kept in my apron pocket. I'd jot down things customers said, track which dishes sold best, which seasonings made people smile. I asked quiet questions, watched every step in the kitchen like I was conducting field research, because I was. Benny's Diner became my classroom, my lab. And every night after Mom went to bed, I slipped into my room, opened my laptop, and worked. Menu costing, marketing strategy, brand story refinement, nutrition certifications, web domain searches, trademark applications. I'd study competitors, sketch floor plans, write copy for a website that didn't exist yet. Marcus sent me resources like a coach prepping an underdog before the big game, templates, case studies, podcasts. He never handed me shortcuts, yet only tools. "You've got to do the work," he'd say, "but I'll make sure you're not building in the dark." I loved that about him. He never pitied me. He partnered with me, and I was finally becoming the version of myself I used to see in daydreams. The one who was resourceful, fearless, smart enough to run something of her own. But I didn't stop working. That part mattered to me. I needed to earn every inch of this rebuild. I needed to prove, mostly to myself, that I could still rise without abandoning the things that had kept me alive all these years. The soft launch came before I expected it. Marcus had secured me a weekend spot at the city's annual Health and Wellness Expo, a massive local event where vendors, nutritionists, trainers, and health startups showcased their products. He paid for the booth himself, refused to let me cover it. "Call it angel investment," he'd said with a grin. For 2 weeks leading up to the fair, I barely slept. I hand-labeled every container, designed signage, tasted and retasted everything. I rented warming trays from a friend of a friend. I borrowed tablecloths from the diner. And when the day came, I stood behind a table covered in tiny glass jars of turmeric shots, chia parfaits, and handwritten menu cards, wearing a white linen shirt and the harvest and heel apron I'd sewn myself. I expected curiosity. I didn't expect the line. People swarmed the booth, asking where my store was located, if I catered, if I had a newsletter. A wellness blogger tagged me in an Instagram post. A nurse practitioner asked if I'd be open to partnering for a hospital's employee nutrition program. Someone even called me Chef Ray. Chef Ray, not waitress, not Eliza's sister. Me. I kept my head down and worked all day. Smiled, pitched, served, listened. And by the end of that weekend, I had a list of potential customers, a list of people asking to invest, and a growing belief in something I hadn't felt in years: my future. Marcus was waiting by my booth when the fair closed. "You see that?" he said, arms crossed, beaming. I nodded, barely holding back tears. "You're not preparing anymore," he said. "You're launching." That night, I sat alone in my apartment, hands still sore from serving. I looked around at the stacks of leftover packaging and bags of raw ingredients and notebooks filled with scribbles. This was no longer a dream. This was a blueprint. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't building for someone else. Not for Eliza, not for approval, not even for revenge. I was building something because I could. I was ready. And the world had no idea what was coming. Eliza had no idea. While I was waking up at 5 a.m. to prepare turmeric oat bars and cold-pressed beet juice samples, she was posting filtered selfies in hospital elevators with hashtags like #WomenInMedicine and #GrindNeverStops. Her world was still bright, polished, and insulated, and I was no longer part of it. We hadn't spoken in over a month. She'd sent a few texts, all transactional. One asked for help editing her grant proposal. Another asked if I knew anyone who could cater a networking brunch she was co-hosting for cardiology interns. I didn't respond to either. It wasn't out of anger anymore, just clarity. Eliza had made it very clear what she valued: accolades, appearances, people with letters after their names. She still thought of me as the supportive big sister in the background, ready to drop everything when she needed a favor. She didn't even realize I had stepped off that stage, quietly, completely. But that didn't stop her from playing the part of the self-made success story. Her social media presence was growing fast. I'd started noticing her posts reshared by lifestyle accounts, health blogs, even a Women Who Win Instagram page with 500,000 followers. One day, while scrolling through the feed during a break at the diner, I saw her face sandwiched between a CEO of a wellness brand and a woman who'd just summited Everest. The caption under Eliza's picture read, "Rising star in cardiology, first-gen doctor, built her future with grit and no handouts." I actually laughed out loud. The customers at the counter looked at me funny. I flipped my phone over and exhaled slowly. The more she said it, the more I stopped needing to correct her. Because something in me had shifted. I wasn't chasing acknowledgement anymore. I was building something that would speak louder than her denial ever could. But still, her blindness was staggering. Even Mom hadn't picked up on what I was doing. When I came home with vendor badges from expos and wellness events, she barely glanced at them. She was too busy watching Eliza's TV interviews, clapping softly like it was her daughter who had won a gold medal. "She's so polished," she'd say, "so confident. You know, the hospital just made her the youngest assistant director of outpatient cardiology." I nodded and offered to make tea. I didn't say that I was in meetings with 2 retail buyers. I didn't say that I had just received a local entrepreneur grant. I didn't say that my soft launch had generated more buzz than I ever expected. It wasn't that I wanted to hide it. It's that I was tired of handing people good news and watching them hand it right back, so I kept it mine. Even when Eliza invited Mom and me to her professional milestone celebration dinner, yes, that was the actual name on the invitation, I didn't say no. I just didn't confirm. Marcus, of course, knew everything. He'd become my anchor. When I showed him the invite, I expected him to roll his eyes. Instead, he said, "You should go." "Why? So I can smile while she collects another trophy?" "No," he said, "so you can watch her play her part, while knowing what's coming next." That stuck with me, because the truth was, I wasn't the same person I was 6 months ago. I no longer needed to fit into her world. I was building my own, and it was growing faster than anyone, especially Eliza, could imagine. In fact, while she was planning her fancy dinner at a 5-star restaurant, I was preparing for something much bigger. A major sponsorship partnership with a chain of hospitals launching a new wellness and nutrition initiative. Harvest and Heal had landed a meeting with their business development board after one of the nurses from the health fair forwarded our info. They wanted us, me, to create a line of hospital-approved healing meal kits for patients recovering from cardiac surgery. I pitched, I refined, I presented. They loved it. The deal wasn't finalized yet, but there were contracts in review. Paperwork with my name on it. One clause in particular stood out. Subject to final approval by board leadership and marketing. Partnership announcement to coincide with new branding rollout across all 3 regional hospitals. And the lead hospital? Eliza's. Of course, she had no idea. She was still running her mile-a-minute, achievement-loaded life. Still posting snapshots of lecture slides and congratulatory bouquets. Still sitting in panels where she talked about resilience as if she had invented the concept. But she didn't see what was coming. That the next time she stepped into her hospital's lobby, she would see my name on a banner above the check-in desk. That her department would soon be stocked with wellness meals bearing the Harvest and Heal logo. That her boss had already mentioned me in a meeting. The founder who's shaking up hospital nutrition. Eliza was blind to it all, and I didn't need to warn her, because some truths don't need to be told. They need to be seen. It was a Wednesday when the email came through. Subject, final approval. Launch partnership with Harvest and Heal. From Regional Director, Westbridge Medical Network. To Liana Ray. I reread the email 3 times. Then again, just to be sure. It was official. Harvest and Heal had been named the exclusive wellness partner for 3 major hospitals across the state, including Westbridge Heart Institute, where Eliza worked. I stared at the signed contract attached at the bottom. Liana Ray, founder and CEO. The letters felt foreign on the screen, even though I'd typed them myself. For years, I had been the woman who delivered food. Now, I was the woman creating it, strategically, intentionally, and for people who had once dismissed women like me. The announcement was scheduled to coincide with the hospital's upcoming Community Health and Innovation Gala, a fancy name for a quarterly event that brought together donors, doctors, executives, and press to highlight new programs and partnerships. This time, the marketing team had planned something big. Big banners, press releases, video presentations, and a keynote speaker. Me. I didn't smile right away. I just sat there. It was poetic, almost unnervingly so. The same hospital where I had once sat quietly outside waiting for Eliza to finish shifts, the same building where I used to drop off her lunch because she forgot to pack one, was now the stage for my introduction. And the best part? Eliza had no idea. She knew the gala was happening, of course. She'd even posted about it weeks earlier. Honored to be hosting this quarter's Health and Innovation Gala. So many exciting things happening in the world of patient care. I'd stared at that caption with an odd sense of distance. It didn't make me angry. It didn't make me roll my eyes. It just reminded me how fully disconnected she still was. She still thought this world belonged only to people with initials after their name, MD, PhD, DO. She didn't know that people like me had entered the room, not as servers, but as sponsors. The hospital's marketing team had asked if I wanted to be introduced as a surprise or part of the program from the beginning. I told them to list me plainly, founder and partner of Harvest and Heal. No theatrics, no special entrances. Just the truth, out in the open. Because I didn't need the moment to be dramatic. It already was. The week before the gala, I visited the Westbridge facility in person for a final walkthrough. The new branding materials were being installed, polished signage near the nutrition wing, updated brochures for patients, and a huge vertical banner at the front entrance. Introducing our wellness partner, Harvest and Heal, a revolution in recovery nutrition. My name was at the bottom, curated by founder and CEO Liana Ray. I stood there in the lobby, watching a team secure the banner to the wall, and thought back to the first time I stepped into that hospital. I was 22, tired from a double shift, carrying a bag of takeout Eliza had begged me to bring. I remembered how I sat in the waiting area, invisible, while nurses and interns rushed past, calling her name with respect I never received. Now they'd be reading my name, not whispered, not hidden, posted. The days leading up to the gala were oddly calm. I still went to work at the diner, still helped Mom refill her prescription bottles, still folded laundry. But inside, I was humming with a quiet fire. Not one of revenge. That feeling had passed long ago. It was something deeper now. Resolution. Marcus, of course, knew everything. He'd be at the gala too, standing quietly in the back, just like he always preferred. "You're the star," he told me. "I'm just the flashlight." He was wrong. He was the first beam of belief I'd seen in years. On the night before the event, Eliza texted the family group chat. "Hosting the gala tomorrow. Big deal. I'll be up there representing the whole department. Wish me luck." Mom replied with her usual hearts and clapping emojis. I sent a thumbs up. That was all. Let her shine, I thought. Let her walk in ready to dazzle. Let her wear her best heels and rehearse her opening lines. Because when she stepped onto that stage, so confident, so sure, she would be walking straight into a story that didn't revolve around her anymore. And this time, when they called my name, she'd be the one sitting in the audience. And I'd be the one holding the mic. The night of the gala, the hospital shimmered. The lobby had been transformed with soft uplighting, fresh flower arrangements, and catered hors d'oeuvres. Everyone wore their finest. Doctors in tailored suits, donors in understated elegance, hospital staff mingling politely with healthcare executives and corporate sponsors. The air buzzed with practiced conversation. Eliza floated through it like she was born for it. Her name tag read, Dr. Eliza Ray, host, Cardiology Department. She smiled effortlessly, greeting people with polished warmth. She posed for photos near a podium, flanked by branded banners, and paused occasionally to compliment someone's outfit or talk about recent advancements in outpatient care. What she didn't know, what no one around her knew, was that this entire night, this carefully curated event, had a new center of gravity. And it wasn't her. I walked in alone. No dramatic entrance, no spotlight, just me, in a fitted black pantsuit, minimal makeup, hair pulled back, confident. The Harvest and Heal team was already inside setting up our sampling table near the nutrition and patient care zone. Our display featured branded jars of herbal infusions, layered grain bowls, and promotional cards with my signature on the back. A soft spotlight lit our standing banner. Revolutionizing Recovery. In partnership with Westbridge Medical. Harvest and Heal. Founder and CEO, Liana Ray. I saw her before she saw me. She was near the stage, nodding at something an administrator said, drink in hand, shoulders relaxed. I stood across the room, not trying to hide, just letting the moment build on its own. The program began a few minutes later. The chief of operations took the mic, welcomed everyone, and began listing the hospital's latest achievements. Near the end of his speech, he cleared his throat and smiled. And now, we are proud to unveil something very close to our hearts. In recent years, we've learned that recovery doesn't begin with medicine alone. It begins with nourishment, real, mindful, healing nourishment. And tonight, we're excited to announce our newest partnership initiative. There was a murmur across the room, faces turned, eyes lifted toward the stage's big screen. And then came the slide. A bright, bold title. Harvest and Heal, ex-Westbridge Medical. Strategic Wellness Collaboration. Founded by Liana Ray. I watched Eliza's head tilt, like she wasn't sure she'd read it right. Her lips parted slightly. A beat passed. Then another. She turned slowly toward the stage, confusion slipping into disbelief. The COO continued. This partnership, spearheaded by a powerful and visionary entrepreneur, will provide whole food-based wellness kits for recovering patients across all 3 of our regional facilities. Our teams have worked with her to develop curated meal plans that support cardiac healing, immunity boosting, and sustainable nutrition. Another slide appeared. A photo of me in a Harvest and Heal apron, standing in a field beside local growers. My face, my name. This isn't just a sponsorship, the speaker added. It's a new era in recovery nutrition. Please welcome the founder of Harvest and Heal and our new hospital wellness partner, Liana Ray. Applause. It didn't thunder. It didn't erupt. It grew, spreading across the room as people turned to look, many of them recognizing me for the first time. The woman who'd always been standing quietly in the background was suddenly stepping into the light. I walked to the stage, calm and steady. The click of my heels was the only sound between the claps. I didn't look at Eliza, not yet. I took the mic, looked out over the room, breathed once. Thank you. I'm honored to be here tonight, I began. And I'm even more honored that something I built, something that started in a tiny notebook during diner night shifts, will now play a role in helping patients heal. A pause. Then, some of you know me as the founder of Harvest and Heal. Others may remember me simply as a girl from this town. For years, I believed that the only way to help others was by staying small, by staying behind the curtain. But I've learned something different. I scanned the room. Then finally, my eyes met hers. Eliza stood frozen. No smile now. No camera-ready expression. Just shock. The kind that tightens the jaw and locks the knees. I used to think being behind someone's success was the most noble thing I could do, I continued. But tonight, I stand here not behind anyone. I stand beside every person who was told their work was too quiet to matter. A few people murmured in agreement. Someone near the front clapped. Our food has the power to heal. So do our stories. Thank you for letting me share both. I stepped back, and the applause came again. This time, stronger, more certain. It wasn't wild or celebrity-like. It was earned. It was real. As I walked off the stage, I passed her. Eliza reached for my arm. Liana, what is this? You didn't tell me. I stopped. Looked her in the eye. This is what I've been building while you were busy forgetting who helped build you. And then I walked past her. Not angry. Not smug. Just free. The moment wasn't about revenge. It was about restoration. And finally, I had restored myself. The moment I stepped off the stage, I felt it shift. Not in the dramatic, slow-motion kind of way you see in movies, no gasps, no dropped glasses, but in a quieter, heavier sense. Like a pressure in the air had been released and reformed into something new. People didn't see me the same way anymore. I wasn't the waitress sister. I wasn't background noise. I was the woman who just got a standing partnership with the very institution Eliza thought she ruled. The applause faded into murmurs and subtle head turns as I made my way through the crowd. Some people nodded respectfully. A few reached out to shake my hand. Others stared at me like they were trying to reassemble what they thought they knew. And then I saw her, Eliza, still standing near the front, surrounded by stunned silence. Her glass of champagne sat untouched on a tray beside her. Her lips were slightly parted, her posture too stiff to look casual. She'd just spent half a year being celebrated as the voice of independence, resilience, and self-made glory. And now the very narrative she'd built was crumbling in front of her. Her hospital had just handed the spotlight to the sister she had publicly ignored. She moved toward me with slow, careful steps. Not rushed, but with the urgency of someone trying to catch up to a moment they didn't expect to lose control of. Liana, she said softly, why didn't you tell me? Her voice was low, flat. The smile she tried to wear didn't reach her eyes. I figured you'd see it eventually, I said, calm. No edge, just truth. She glanced toward the nearest banner, the one with my face and my business's mission printed in bold next to the hospital's logo. I could see her trying to process it, trying to frame it as a coincidence or a temporary PR move. But there was too much signage, too much planning, too much of me everywhere. This is your company? She asked, even though she already knew. I nodded. You're partnering with us? No, I corrected. You're partnering with me. That was the moment she truly faltered. A flicker in her expression, barely a twitch, but it gave her away. The understanding that this wasn't just a wellness initiative. This was a shift in hierarchy, a public one. I didn't realize you were doing all this, she said, grasping. You didn't ask, I said simply. I could see her mind racing, looking for something to say, something to latch onto that would restore the balance she was used to. That's amazing, she said finally, the kind of compliment people give when they're not sure what the proper reaction is. Really, it's just unexpected. I smiled, but there was nothing soft in it. It always is. When people assume you're standing still just because you're standing behind them. Her eyes darted toward a group of hospital executives who were now clustered around the Harvest and Heal display, sampling food and nodding with interest. A few of them made eye contact with me and waved. Is this permanent? She asked, almost to herself. Yes, I said, it's only the beginning. She opened her mouth like she wanted to keep the conversation going, maybe to ask how or why I hadn't told her, or to spin it into something more palatable. But there was no room left. The facts were already in motion. The audience had shifted. The story had changed. And this time, I was the one holding the pen. Across the room, I noticed Mom arrive. Slightly late, dressed in her Sunday best lavender blazer. She spotted Eliza first and moved toward her, beaming. But before Eliza could speak, Mom caught sight of me. Her eyes went wide, then softened, then confused. Liana? She asked, looking between me and the banner. This is you? It's mine, I said. Her hand flew to her chest, stunned. "Why didn't you say anything?" "I needed to build it without needing applause," I said. "But I'm glad you're here now." She hugged me. A little tighter than usual, a little longer. I looked over her shoulder and saw Eliza, still standing there, arms limp at her sides, watching a crowd that used to orbit her shift their attention to someone else. She wasn't angry. She wasn't dramatic. She was just silent. The silence of someone who had built their story atop a lie they believed would never be challenged. The consequences weren't a scandal. They were worse. They were the look on her face as she realized that the person she had underestimated, the one she had dismissed in front of peers and on national interviews, now outranked her. Not in degrees, in impact, in presence, in power. And she couldn't erase it. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel petty. I just felt done. Not with her. With the version of me that once needed her approval to feel whole. That girl no longer existed. And standing here in my own spotlight, I knew I had become something she could never ignore again. That night, long after the lights had dimmed and the banners were packed away, I sat alone in my apartment. Still in the same black pantsuit I'd worn to the gala, my heels kicked off at the door, a glass of chamomile tea cooling in my hands. The apartment was quiet. No text from Eliza, no calls from Mom, no buzz of notifications flooding my phone. And for the first time in a long time, I welcomed the silence. Because this silence wasn't empty. It was earned. The night had unfolded exactly as it needed to. Not in fire and drama, not with shouting or breakdowns, but with clarity. Me, standing on a stage that was never meant for me. Not apologizing, not proving, just being, confidently, completely, as myself. I hadn't built Harvest and Heal to prove Eliza wrong. I hadn't stayed up all those nights perfecting menus and studying market data to shame the people who overlooked me. I did it because deep down, underneath all the years of sacrifice and self-doubt, I knew I was capable of more. I always had been. But I had forgotten something crucial. I wasn't just capable of building someone else's dream. I was worthy of building my own. And tonight, I had done just that. The applause still echoed faintly in my memory. Not because it was loud or dramatic, but because it felt real. The look in people's eyes when they heard my name, the respect, the curiosity, the spark of recognition. Not for who I was related to, not for what I gave up, but for what I created. That was my victory. Not the look on Eliza's face when she saw the banner, not the way the room shifted. Not even the contract that now tied my company's name to hers in an unbreakable partnership. No, my real victory was internal. It was in the moment I realized I didn't want to trade places with her anymore. Not for a second, because while she was still fighting for image, for prestige, for the next post-worthy moment, I was no longer performing. I was living, fully. And the girl I used to be, the girl who bent over backward to make others shine, the one who worked 3 jobs and clung to crumbs of praise, she could finally rest. She did what she had to do, but she wasn't needed anymore. I took a sip of tea and walked to the small vision board I kept on the wall across from my desk. It was just a cork board, cheap, a little frayed around the edges. But to me, it was sacred. It had scraps of my dream pinned to it. A mock-up logo, a photo of a healing garden, an index card that said, "Reclaim your name," and a sketch of a little storefront cafe with big windows and hanging plants. I stared at it for a long time. Then slowly, I pulled down the card that said, "Someday." Because that day had come. There was no more waiting. No more hoping someone would see me. No more shrinking to fit someone else's narrative. I had taken the long road, the quiet road, the one with cracked pavement and very little applause. But I walked it anyway, one foot after another. And now I stood on solid ground, not in someone's shadow, in my own light. And the best part? I didn't feel the need to gloat. I didn't want to hurt Eliza. I didn't even need her to apologize, because I wasn't carrying the weight of that old pain anymore. It had shaped me, yes, but it didn't define me. Not anymore. As I cleaned up the papers on my desk, my phone buzzed once, A message from Marcus. "You did it, but I knew you would." I smiled. Simple, true. I didn't reply right away. I just let the words sit, because somewhere deep inside me, I finally believed them. I did do it, not to prove I mattered, but because I always did. 3 days after the gala, I received a letter, not an email, not a text. An actual handwritten letter, folded neatly into a simple cream envelope with no return address, just my name in careful cursive. At first I didn't recognize the handwriting, but the moment I opened it and saw the first line, I knew. I didn't know how to say this out loud. Eliza. I stood in my kitchen, back pressed against the counter, reading the note in full before I even took off my coat. Her words weren't elegant. They weren't self-pitying. They weren't dripping with sentiment. They were raw, and that's what made them feel real. Liana, I didn't know how to say this out loud. I watched you on that stage the other night and felt like the ground shifted underneath me. Not because you were standing where I thought I should be, but because I finally saw you. I don't think I've let myself really see you in years. I told myself it was easier to focus on what I was building, that I needed tunnel vision, that being busy excused being blind, but it doesn't. You were never just a waitress. You were never just anything. You were the reason I made it through med school, the reason I survived some of the worst years of my life. And I'm ashamed that it took a banner and a microphone and a boardroom contract for me to admit that. I don't expect you to forgive me or even respond. I just needed to say this. I'm sorry. For the years I treated you like a footnote, for the years I forgot who taught me what strength actually looks like. You didn't just change the hospital's menu, you changed me, Eliza. I read it twice, then a third time, and when I finally set it down, I didn't cry. I didn't scoff or roll my eyes. I didn't feel smug or superior. I felt still, like a tide had come in and receded, and all that was left was clarity. For so long, I'd imagined this moment. I'd fantasized about it during my loneliest shifts at the diner, the day Eliza would finally recognize everything I'd done, everything I'd given, everything I was. But now that it was here, I realized something unexpected. I didn't need this letter. I appreciated it. I respected the honesty in it. I saw it for what it was, not a perfect fix, but a first step. Her choice to look in the mirror and see the cost of her pride. But I didn't feel healed because she apologized. I felt healed because I'd stopped waiting for her to. That was the difference. Forgiveness, I learned, isn't always about the other person asking for it. Sometimes it's about choosing not to carry the weight anymore, even if they never understand why it was heavy. Still, this letter, it meant something. It meant she was trying. And that was enough for me. I folded it carefully and slid it into the back of my vision board, behind the card that used to say, "Someday." I didn't frame it. I didn't post about it. I didn't even tell Marcus or Mom, because this wasn't a public moment. It was private. It was ours. A few days later, I got a call from the hospital. They wanted to schedule a co-lead roundtable discussion on nutrition and cardiac recovery, and asked if I'd be willing to sit beside Eliza as a speaker. I hesitated, not because I was uncomfortable, but because I knew what it symbolized. Sharing that table meant showing the world that there was no bad blood, that we were collaborators now, equals. I said yes, but on one condition, that I would open the discussion, that I would speak first. They agreed. On the day of the event, Eliza met me in the hallway before the session began. She looked nervous, a different kind of nervous than I'd ever seen. Not about the spotlight, about me. "Thank you for coming," she said. "I didn't come for you," I replied gently. "I came for the patients, for the mission." She nodded. I deserved that. We stood in silence for a moment. Then I said, "But I'm glad you wrote the letter." Her shoulders relaxed just a little. "I meant every word." "I know." She didn't ask if we were okay, and I didn't offer a hug. We walked into the room side by side, not as sisters pretending the past never happened, not as rivals, just two women who had learned the hard way that recognition means nothing if it's not rooted in respect. And for the first time in our lives, we were finally getting there. The first Harvest and Heal Cafe opened on a rainy Saturday morning. It wasn't the biggest location, just 1,400 square feet, tucked between a yoga studio and a bookshop on a quiet street downtown. But to me, it felt like a palace. Polished wood floors, handwritten chalkboard menus, big windows that let the morning light pour in. The kind of place I had pictured over and over during all those years of folding napkins and scrubbing ketchup off booths. The grand opening wasn't some flashy ribbon-cutting ceremony. There were no red carpets, no social media influencers, or magazine features. Just a small sign on the door that said, "Now open," a line of mismatched chairs for customers, and the smell of warm cardamom vanilla oats wafting from the kitchen. But by 9 a.m., there was already a line out the door. Young professionals, nurses from the hospital. A woman in scrubs who smiled and said, "We've been waiting for this." A mother with a toddler on her hip who whispered, "I saw your story online. You're the one who built this, right?" I just nodded. It wasn't about the attention. It was about arrival. I walked behind the counter, rolled up my sleeves, and stepped back into the rhythm that had always felt natural to me. But this time, I wasn't serving someone else's vision. This time, it was mine. As I filled bowls and greeted customers, I saw Marcus leaning against the far wall with his coffee, giving me that nod he always did when he knew I didn't need him to say anything. A few hours later, Mom came in. She was wearing the scarf I bought her last Christmas, a little too dressed up for the occasion, but clearly proud. She looked around at the buzzing space, the people smiling over meals I had designed, and shook her head with awe. "I still remember when you used to talk about a place like this," she said, eyes misty. "I thought it was just one of those dreams people let go of." "Not this one," I said, smiling. "Not anymore." She held my hand. "I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner." "You weren't supposed to," I said. "It wasn't your dream to see. It was mine to build." And I had built it. Every inch of it. Out of the broken pieces, the betrayals, the years of being invisible. Out of every shift I worked with sore feet and a silent ache. Out of every moment I wanted to quit but didn't. I didn't rise in spite of those years. I rose because of them. Later that afternoon, I stepped out front to get some air. The rain had cleared. The sky was soft and gold. The sidewalk still damp from the storm. I looked across the street, and for a brief second, I thought I saw her, Eliza, standing near a cab, watching from a distance. She didn't come inside. She didn't wave. She just stood there, like she was taking in the space without needing to enter it. And that was fine. I didn't need her to walk through the door. I didn't need her to sit at a table and taste my food. I didn't even need her to say the words again. I had already heard what I needed to. I turned and went back inside, back into the space that felt like me. The cafe buzzed around me. Laughter, soft jazz, the clink of spoons on ceramic. There was no tension in my chest anymore. No hunger for approval. Only peace. As I stepped behind the counter again, a young woman approached. "Are you the owner?" "Yes," I said. She lit up. "I've been trying to figure out how to start something like this. I've got ideas, but I don't even know where to begin." I smiled, gesturing to the stool at the corner of the bar. "Sit down," I said. "Let's talk." Because this was the real reward. Not revenge, not recognition, not even redemption. Legacy. A new cycle. A new woman about to be told she's not just anything, and someone else right there to stop that lie before it takes root. I would make sure of it. That was the lesson, the real ending. Not about punishing the people who doubted you, but becoming the kind of person who never needed to doubt herself again. As the sun poured through the windows and the cafe filled with voices, I picked up a glass jar labeled Rooted Energy and smiled to myself. I had made it. Not by being loud, but by being sure. And this time, no one would ever write me out of the story again.